If you have been enjoying listening to the stories of entrepreneurs across Edinburgh, then why not subscribe? If you're on YouTube, you can hit the red button down below and hit the bell to get notifications. Or if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, then subscribe to the podcast. We hope you enjoy the show. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Give us some context. Tell us about your business.
Sure. So Vault City Brewing specializes in modern sour beer, which probably won't mean an awful lot to a lot of people listening. But what we do is brew traditional beers in a traditional beer sense. So we use a malted barley base. That is where the similarities with normal beer begins and ends. So we don't use any hops in our beer. We use our own specialist house culture, which is a mixture of normal brewer's yeast and lactobacillus, which is the same sort of souring ingredient that you get in yogurt. That creates like a very sort of almost like fruity tart base beer that tastes maybe a little bit more akin to a cocktail or a cider than it does to a beer. And to that, we then look at that as our base beer and a bit of a kind of an easel and our artwork to work with, basically. So from there, we'll add copious amounts of fruit, of herbs, spices, flavorings, whatever it is. And at the end of it, what you should get is either a raw expression of the fruits that we're using or something that just tastes absolutely mental and daft. So we brew out of Portobello in Edinburgh. We've been going for 5 years now. We ship our beer internationally. We work with supermarkets in the UK. Employ about 30 people, and I've got 2 bars in Edinburgh now.
Wow. 2? I didn't know there was 2. Where's the other one?
Yeah, we've got the wee vault in Haymarket, which is 12 seats and 24 taps. So, you know, everyone has 2 taps of beer for themselves.
Good ratio, like that.
And then we've got Porty Vault, which is in Portobello. So that's, we opened that in July last year, and it's a lot more sort of relaxed bar bistro type place, and still got 36 lines. So, you know, you've got a really good load of different beers. But it's in, you know, seaside Portobello. It's a great place, and it's only about a 3-minute walk from the brewery. So from this month, we'll be doing brewery tours from there. So
great.
It's a great location.
And some of the beers you do are mental. I've seen like birthday cakes and like that. It's really, it's quite an interesting space to be able to, as you say, create. Like there's
definitely
so much to do there. So
never looked at myself as a creative individual. Then I kind of look back at the last 5 years and go, there must be something in there that's a little bit unhinged, if not creative. The stuff that, you know, it sounds crazy that my Monday morning can consist of, hey, Steve, can you try this 999 grams of apricot per litre of beer that we've added birthday cakes to and make sure that it tastes okay. Sounds great on paper, but see, doing that on a Monday morning after you've brushed your teeth, it's not the greatest fun in the world.
So how did you get into it then? Because by memory, were you not with BT or one of the corporates before?
Yeah, sure. So growing up through university and whatnot, always had jobs that were sort of sales leaning. Managed to fail university in year 3 of Heriot Watt Economics and Management. Kind of had a look at what I wanted to do with life, and was working at Carphone Warehouse at the time, and decided that I really did enjoy sales. So decided to pursue a career in sales, and applied for a job that was a bit beyond my means with BT, and seemed to be just kind of going from one phase of the interview to the next, and all the while thinking, this is great experience. I'm getting interview experience. And then was recruited onto their, what they call it, the sales academy. So moved down to London, and all of a sudden was selling to other blue chip companies, all the sort of gambit of IT. So I thought it was just going to be mobile phone contracts, but it was, you know, back in the day when, you know, video conferencing wasn't really much of a thing. So selling video conferencing, call center technology. I don't know what BT were doing putting a 22-year-old in front of these IT directors of multi-billion-pound companies, but I did manage to sell a phone system to Cemex. So if you ever go and buy cement from Cemex, there's a good chance that that's going through my phone lines.
Weird claim to fame, but yeah.
It's my greatest claim to fame. This podcast goes downhill from here.
So how do you end up in beer? Like what happens? What's the process from, you know, BT to beer?
Yeah, sure. So generational thing, maybe. I've enjoyed a drink for as long as I can remember. Even at the age of 16, 17, I remember drinking Guinness when all my pals were drinking Corona. So I think I've always had a little bit of inquisitive nature when it comes to alcohol. I've always enjoyed the sort of flavours and the process. When I was living in Leeds, moved up there with BT, there was a homebrew shop that I used to drive past, Marley Homebrew Shop. I think it still exists, and I haven't been meaning to go back in and see Ground Zero. But went in and went, okay, well, I can buy a bucket, some sugar syrup, a pack of beer, and pack of beer ingredients. It's going to cost me £60, and that gets me 60 bottles of beer. I was like, that's expensive. That doesn't work out. Oh, but then you can buy the ingredients again, and then it's only £20 for 60 bottles of beer. So I got it because I wanted to, I wanted to get drunk on the cheap. Was where this all started from.
Like a true Scotsman.
It's the start of all great adventures. I wanted to get drunk, and I wanted to do it cheap. So made a beer, Woodford's Wherry, which is actually a real ale. So it was a clone of that. By the time that had finished, I already had 4 other beers on the go. So I, went big with 5 buckets of beer into the little spare room of my house in, can't remember, it was some little Calverley outside of Leeds. And just really got the bug. Before I knew it, I transitioned from the world of doing beer kits to all grain. Had bought a little fridge for the house that had a keg in it that you could then pour your beer on draft. Then when I moved back up to Scotland, part of my kitchen renovations included a 8-tap beer tap setup that goes down to my cellar. So, I had parties around at mine with 8 different beers on tap, and that's where it all really began.
And it's what? So all this is kind of as a pastime, kind of alongside the day job, so to speak, yeah?
Totally.
Yeah.
So the day job in IT, BT was a challenge, but got, cut my teeth there really well, got mostly fond memories of that. And then TSG was just brilliant. Really enjoyed my time with Technology Services Group. Really love sales, enjoy going out and talking to people. I like technology, so... it wasn't one of these stories where I hated the corporate world and I wanted to get out. I still miss it. Like, being able to take time off at the weekend and getting a decent salary for cutting about the country, talking to people about technology. It was a dream. Really enjoyed that place. I worked with a lot of great people, and plenty of times on Teams calls where there's like steam in the background. So, Steve's your house on fire? I was like, no, it's just a batch of beer in the background. Like, you can't brew on company time. I was like, it's really hands off at this part, don't worry.
And at that point, was that for consumption or for sale?
So for consumption, the real sort of driver for me was the point where I realized I was chucking away so much beer because I just wanted to make more. Like I was making quality beer. I was more than happy with the stuff I was making. The beers that I was buying was typically to try and refine my palate and try and work to get to nail the styles of beer. I remember trying to replicate the beers from the likes of Colonel, Verdant, Cloudwater. These are people that I really, really looked up to, and was trying their beers and trying to understand what they were doing, and sent a couple of emails away, and we now get emails from homebrewers, and I always take the time to try and answer as many questions as I can, because I used to be the weirdo on the other end of the email. Not that they're all weirdos like you, but you sometimes feel a bit of a fanboy. But I was, and I still am. It's a pinch me moments when I get to talk to these guys as peers rather than the people who I really looked up to.
And just on the pinch me moments then, give us an example of one where you've met one of your peers or the idols that you initially had
for sure.
There as a peer.
I mean, I remember one of our big breaks was going down to Beavertown's Extravaganza Festival. Oh, yeah. So we kind of came at a fortunate time when they initially sold a share to Heineken, and a bunch of breweries pulled out. And then they kind of like went scraping the barrel and found us. So we went along to Beavertown Extravaganza, and the first night went out for dinner and bumped into a couple of brewers from Keys, a brewery from the Netherlands, and I really looked up to these guys. Like they made beautiful imperial stouts, and like just really sort of nailed every style that they turned their hands to. And I sat there with the 2 owners, and it was just like, this is still the guy, and I still am the person who, makes homebrew recipes and looks at these beers and tries them, got excited about the latest releases, and had, a couple of bottle shops in Edinburgh that had me down for every release from various breweries, so that I made sure that I didn't miss out on beers. And then you're sat down shooting with the other guys. So
wow,
yeah, it was really cool.
And had they kind of tasted your beer at this point, or have you since?
They tried it the next day, and they seemed to enjoy it. But it's quite difficult to sit in front of someone and drink their beer and tell them it's rubbish. We have had it a couple of times, but I probably shouldn't say this because it's not. But anytime I'm with people going around a beer festival and we're trying beers, like obviously you can't see someone's beers blacking in front of them, so we always make sure if we mention the carbonation of the beer, that's a subtle cue to the other person that I'm with that the beer's rubbish. Like, so the carbonation on this is just beautiful. And then the other person, what they hear is, let's get out of here, because this is, proper drain pour.
A drain pour. That's great. So you start chucking away the beer. You're like, I shouldn't be wasting this. I'm getting geeky with it to the point of like, I just want to create more. And so what's that step? Like, what was that moment where you were like, hey, this is a business?
Sure. So my wife Adele was graduating university, and we did I think I'd sold a phone system to a cement company, so I got a little bit of a bonus. So we decided to go to Thailand. And at that time, a book called Modern Sour Beer had come out, and it was the first real book on sour beer brewing that had ever been published. And I was brewing a lot of sours at the time, and IPAs mainly. Reading through the book, I was just looking at what was going on in America. Beer breweries focusing on sours were springing up at a rate of knots. America typically is 3 to 5 years ahead of us in terms of styles. Look to the big breweries in the UK, so Beavertown and Brewdog, they'd just started their own sour programs. They'd had their first releases, and my gut was that they were taking it the wrong direction. It was very specialized. It was really sort of teeth enamel stripping sour. It wasn't going to appeal to the every man or woman. Decided at that point to give it a crack. It was very much then, well, what's the worst that can happen here? We don't need an enormous investment in the grand scheme of things to test this out. We can probably do it from the house. We need to check. And then it was on to planning mode, checking with HMRC, with environmental health. I'd met my previous co-founder at that point, Johnny, who was brewing for the Hanging Bat. We both had a similar interest in sour beer, and that then started the journey. The planning commenced.
So did you start selling then? Is that like...
Takes a wee while. So you got to get all your ducks in a row, environmental health. The problem is, because it was brewing from a house, it seemed like everyone wanted to come and just have a look at what on earth was going on. So we had 2 HMRC officers come round, very official like, and just couldn't really wrap their head around exactly what it was we were looking to do. So I'd sent them the site plan, which included my refrigerator in the kitchen, the back door. So they looked at the kit and went, that has to remain in situ at all times. Like, it was about 400 litre kit, so you could stack the pots on top of one another. Not that we would ever dare do that, because they told us not to. But they said that if we ever come around and inspect, you have to have the kit lying out exactly like that, because it has to be as to plan. I was like, okay, well, when you come to inspect, will you knock? Yes, we will. I was like, okay. It might take me a wee while to answer. So the kit got stacked away. Of course it did. It's one of these regulations that you go, yes, okay, sure thing. But we did have to have a sign displayed on the, what is now my daughter's nursery, but was a spare room, saying you are now entering a customs and excise warehouse. Because we were holding beer in duty suspense in my spare room, you had to make sure that you had, you couldn't bring in a pack of cigarettes, because I had duty paid on nicotine. You couldn't bring in outside beer, so my spare room was a fully fledged customs and excise warehouse.
Wow, that's crazy.
Brilliant, isn't
Yeah,
it?
so that was quite funny. There's just a load of quirks. Environmental health came round, got a cat and a dog, and had to install an automatic door closer so the cat could not get into the kitchen whilst we were brewing. And it was just one of those things. But we got there, and I think a lot of these organisations can sometimes get a lot of hate, and to be fair to a lot, the vast majority of them, they've been fantastic. Like, we've had a lot of help from sort of government organisations throughout over the years. So, especially Business Gateway have been instrumental in helping us get set up and then helping us along the way. Nice Scottish enterprise. So
nice. And one of the things that you kind of said previously was this idea of questioning everything, and actually just your kind of question of the customs guy, will you knock before you enter? So tell us a bit more about that angle on questioning everything.
Of course. So
behind that?
I know from a young age I've been an inquisitive, annoying. You told me not to swear in this podcast. It's really not normal for me not to.
Yeah, all right. You can swear. Crack on.
Oh, you've got a beep button. Great. Okay, pass it here. Inquisitive bastard. So I feel like I do have a good knack of having a big long stick that I poke at things with, while still managing not to annoy people too much. I do get there eventually, but I like to know an awful lot, and I got told by a member of staff who, one of our greatest members of staff that we've got, that I'm controlling. And I think she said it in a positive manner. But I think it's just from a perspective of, I do just like to know a little bit of everything. Not that I ever think I'm right. I never want to be the smartest guy in the room in any one area. But I always poke sticks at things. We do things incredibly differently to a lot of other breweries. We were the first brewery in the UK to adopt a 4-day working week, and that was an incredible challenge to get that up and running. We've got various means of working that equipment manufacturers, when they come in, it's like they don't listen to you because they're just not understanding how it is that you're doing something. So you have to kind of go through things maybe 3 times till they go, wait a second. So you're telling me, proper Greg Wallace moment. But yeah, it's I think it's just that inquisitive nature that can really get you far, and trying to find positives where there can just be sort of, blinded by negatives. That's where you really need to kind of be willing to ask the difficult questions, because the difficult questions tend to get the best answers.
Yeah. And interestingly, linking back to what you said about your kind of career in sales as well, I guess sales is all about asking questions as opposed to speaking. So how do you feel that experience from the corporate days has helped you, build your business to where it is now?
Oh, immensely. So really lucky in my last job to be in front of some very talented and successful individuals. So IT 10 years ago was maybe looked at something that you kind of had to do, and was a bit of like, we'll get you a new laptop, and what do we need to make the accounts work and stuff like that. But I think everybody's now realizing that IT is pivotal to businesses. Like, if you don't have a solid IT strategy, then your business will not keep up with the competition and will not keep your customers happy. So being able to sit in front of managing directors, finance directors, sales directors, HR professionals, IT touches every part of the organization, which meant I got to talk to a lot of people who were heads of departments in, my 60 customers, which did change. So, I got to meet a lot of new people, and some of them to this day I still, see as friends and mentors. And just being able to think about, okay, so I worked with this recruitment company back in the day, and I remember they had this problem, which isn't exactly the same as ours, but I think I can apply their thinking and that logic to this particular situation. And I think that's been invaluable. I think I got a master's in business by talking to these people as much as I did. So it was good. But I mean, at the end of the day, I still did have some service to shift. So I did have to do a sales thing now and again. But a lot of sales is creating a relationship. Sales is relationships. So it did help in terms of, I'd learned what worked and didn't work. And the reality is that sales is something that does come naturally to you. I don't believe that you can teach it. I think it takes a certain individual to be really successful in sales. So, now I'm looking back at, there's a long time when we were just talking about the beers, and we kind of we were bought on the merit of our name, but then when you start going into supermarket world, it's a whole different ballgame. You are a nobody. You've got to get in front of these buyers, and you've got to get them interested in the product. We're really lucky that the vast majority of buyers that we've ever worked with are lovely, but the 1 and 2 that aren't are a right challenge.
Name them. So go on.
No, I was just gonna. So you talking of sales, like what did sales look like from that spare bedroom? Like, where did you start? Friends and family, obviously, but then actually trying to make a move. What happened? Yeah,
sure. So I'll take a step back and talk about the marketing first, because the sales sort of came through as a product of the marketing, and we made sure to really sort of explode onto the scene and get the first beers into the right hands. Get people talking about the brand, make sure the beers were doing something different, something interesting, innovative. We had to, a lot of time was spent on the little details, and I really do feel like it's the little details that count. Recently, I've been in touch with our DPD account manager because our DPD logo wasn't rendering properly on the "we're expecting your delivery" thing that customers get. It just looked off center, and it really bugged me. I think they might have been right. I'm a bit of a control freak, but it's these little things that just like you go, do you know what? Perfection. It's beautiful. Like it just everything's part of the experience from the moment the email comes in for the delivery through to when you're actually drinking the beers. It's all important. So the marketing, we spent a lot of time getting right, and a lot of time getting the product correct. And then, to be honest, we were only making 40 cases of beer at a time. We now make roughly about 1,200. So, looking back, that 40 was a challenge to sell, but eventually it just got to the stage where we were knocking back customers left and right and saying, sorry, we can't fulfill your orders. And we were only doing deliveries, so we were only satisfying the Edinburgh area, sometimes Glasgow. But that was good. So from the kitchen, there wasn't a problem at all. And then we went from 200 litre fermenters to 4,000 litre fermenters when we moved to Dundee. And that was where the challenge sort of really began.
And so why did you go to Dundee from a base in Edinburgh? Why couldn't you have gone more local?
Sure. So my stepdad's involved in concrete and plant. So he was moving the new brewery into 71 Brewing up in Dundee. So got a connection through to 71 Brewing and had the opportunity to take up a small 400 square foot part of their warehouse, which meant that we could stick a couple of fermenters in there, and that was a great opportunity to start building the brewery from the inside out. So at that point, we'd sort of proven that there was demand. I could see that the orders were there. We were having people from Italy and France say, "Hey, we would really like to get a pallet of your beer." And I'm like, "A pallet? That's mad numbers." The Brewdog were in touch. They're like, "We want to buy a whole fermenter worth of beer." That's just crazy numbers. So that's where we kind of got the real sort of, this is the time to go for it. We bought 2 4,000 litre fermenters, put them into the brewery, still bottling everything by hand, but we started to buy the equipment bit by bit by bit. So when we moved to our brewery that we're in currently, we actually had everything that you needed for a brewery, minus the actual brew kit itself, which we were using the brew kit at 71. So the only purchase then was to buy the actual process of turning malted barley into wort, the stuff before beer. And away we went. But it allowed us to grow the company without debt very quickly. Right.
I was going to ask you about financing, how the growth. How have you done it?
So before Vault City started, I was quite interested in quite aligned with the sort of FIRE mentality, financial independence, retire early. So I was on a good salary when I was in sales, saved a bundle of it. Had all tied up in stocks and shares and stuff like that. And then I decided that the better thing to invest in was myself. So took all that, dumped it in. So that was a bit of investment. And then I think friends and family put in another £10,000. And that was it for chapter 1 and 2. Right. Chapter 3 is a completely different story. We're absolutely debt ridden now.
All right.
But that's a story for later on, I think. But the financing was all done personally, and really happy to say that to this date we're still 100% owned. So there's been no sale of any equity so far.
Superb.
Yeah.
So you mentioned like that idea around not taking investment at all. Was that on purpose? Is that a choice? Where are you at in the investment
process?
A
little bit of both. It's funny, I always hear about these like startup businesses that have people like throwing money at them. I'm like, well, where's the people throwing money at us? Like, come on, guys, come out the shadows. We've had a couple of approaches, but it has been a conscious decision to maintain ownership. I think it's just all about looking at what my core values are. One of them, my biggest core value is freedom, and wanting to do what, being able to have freedom to choose our own adventure, with investment can sometimes restrict that. And I don't like the idea of somebody dictating how we run the business. I'm more than open to advice, and I've got a lot of people who I heavily depend on, but there's a couple of decisions that we've made that at the time probably wouldn't have been the most sensible or practical, and sometimes they pay off. Sometimes they don't. But we like taking risks, and we might have not been able to do things the way we'd want to do them.
Just on you mentioned risk there. What's your attitude then to risk? Because earlier on in the conversation, you said, look, what's the worst that can happen? And so tell us a bit more about risk.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've become more risk adverse over the years. In the earlier days, we took substantial risks all over the shop. So our biggest ones. So at the start of chapter 3, which I'd call when we moved to Portobello.
Yeah.
We moved there with our 4 fermenters, so 160 hectolitres of fermentation capacity. Sorry, that's 16,000 litres. An old bottling line that barely worked, and we were making beer pretty inefficiently. We were really only getting like 70% of the beer that we put into the fermenter out as saleable product. A lot of it was getting lost. So we had an efficiency problem, we had a packaging problem, and we had a capacity problem. We could only solve one of those problems with equipment that we could afford. So we could either invest in new fermenters, a new canning line, or a new centrifuge, which separates the fruit puree matter from the beer, giving us more beer, making us more efficient. So what we did was went to 3 different banks at the same time and got to a stage where we'd financed all 3 individual bits of equipment, and they looked at our credit rating and went, well, do you know what, guys, you're a startup and you've done pretty well and you've actually not really got any debt in the company, so we can finance that for you. Great. The question they didn't ask is that, are you talking to 2 other banks right now to take loans that total over £1 million that would blow your debt to equity ratio out of the water? To save my accountants, they advised me not to do this, so credit to them. But we signed all the 3 agreements on the same day, and none of them were any the wiser about each other. And we have now got 10 times the capacity. We've got the centrifuge and we've got the canning line. So they, in terms of risk, when it comes down to it, there will always come an occasion where any business owner has to go, I can continue trundling along and I can do fine, I can make a good living. Yeah. Do you want to, shoot for the ceiling? We shot for the ceiling.
And how did you feel at that point? What's the emotion that goes through you when you're taking that kind of a risk, I guess?
I don't know. It's maybe akin to the feeling before a bungee jump or a skydive. It's that kind of like, I'm so excited to do this. But my God, am I not scared? Like, it was just that sat on the edge of the airplane looking down and going like, this is going to feel amazing. You're at the top of the black run, whatever way you want to spin it. Yeah. It's that thing of, this is going to be a hell of a ride. It's going to be scary, but, I can see my way down. I'm plotting my course. I can see the cuts. I can see the turns. There's the cliffs. So, make sure to avoid them. But yeah, just pure, I've actually got goosebumps thinking about that moment.
Wow, okay.
It was genuinely terrifying. And when you've got everyone around you who you hold in high regard saying, fine, you're going for these 3 bits of kit, at least just go for 2. Like, don't go for the, the full Buna. But I've never been a Buna, more of a Vindaloo. So it's...
Very nice. And so what are some of the scary moments there? I mean, obviously there's a scary moment, or maybe kind of lessons learned from an adverse situation, let's say.
Yeah, sure. So about this time last year was probably the lowest point in Vault City's life, and my life as well, for that matter. It was incredibly challenging. So if you care to cast your mind back to sort of autumn, winter 22, what we'd just done is taken those 3 huge investments and then somehow managed to get a COVID bounce back loan at the same time. So that money then got spent in setting up the second bar. So, you're talking guts of £2 million taken in debt to finance these, significant purchases. And there was a few incidences that happened. So the bar that opened probably didn't perform the way that we thought it would perform. We thought it would be turning over about £11,000 a week. It was doing about 6. So, it was underperforming in quite a significant fashion. We opened our first kitchen as part of that. So it was a smokehouse that came with its own challenges, staffing primarily, food quality. So we were already in a little bit of a precarious position, but, it's fine because, everything's on the up. We're fine. We're coming out of COVID and everybody's going to start drinking a lot more. They're going to be going out with friends and enjoying themselves. Everybody's got a bit of cash because everybody spent hardly anything during COVID. And then the cost of living crisis took real hold. And I remember the first thing that hit us was the cost of carbon dioxide. The energy cost meant that a fertilizer plant down in England had to shut its doors. One of the byproducts of fertilizer production is carbon dioxide, and that produced a huge amount of carbon dioxide for various industries. cylinder of carbon dioxide went up from £35 to £165.
Wow.
Our malt looked like it was about to double. Fruit prices were through the roof. Shipping prices were through the roof. Rightly so, a lot of staff members were coming to me and going, this is getting quite tight every month. Like, we need to be thinking about fairly significant raises. And our customers were buying less. We had one of our worst months ever in September last year. So we were getting hit from all angles. Our suppliers were jacking prices up at a rate I never thought we could see. Yeah. Our customers had less money. And I was having staff members, and I always put people first when talking about the business. They needed more money to survive, and that's something that we couldn't overlook. And yeah, I think I never know whether or not to call it a breakdown, but it was an incredibly challenging moment in my life. And I just remember being away with family, and my stepmom pulling me aside and saying, "You are not okay. You have not been yourself for months now. Like, you are struggling." And it's that not being able to sleep at night. Funnily enough, I could get to sleep easily, but getting up at 2 a.m, and that was me for the rest of the day, keeping food down and things like that. That's the reading through The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz again, and the part of the book where it talks about the struggle. That was my struggle. That was the worst part of my life by a country mile. But we're still here.
And how long did that last then, would you say, that in terms of, obviously, your stepmom noticing that she obviously noticed something? How long was that?
A good 3 months. So that was a 3-month period of real sort of pain and turmoil, and not knowing whether or not the business would pull through. And, we talked about risk tolerance earlier. A lot of the loans and risks, the money that we've taken into the business is secured on directors' guarantees. So, if the company goes, then I go with it. Yeah. Houses are repossessed and all those nice things. And had my daughter earlier that year, so she was only 9 months old, and was looking at it and just going, "Oh, this is tough. Like, we might not see this through." But then going into work and trying to maintain a positive attitude about it all. Like, I can remember talking to some members of staff about things, and it felt like you were watching yourself in third person. Like, it's like you're controlling the Grand Theft Auto character, selecting the dialogue options, because it's just, you go into autopilot. Your mind's always working elsewhere. But it did allow us to really concentrate on making the business as efficient as possible. We cut so much fat from the business at that stage. Usually, I mean, sacking people, didn't sack a single person. But we made sure to double down on ensuring profitability. We spent so much time up until then just looking at growth. Yeah. It allowed me to then go, right, hold on, we need to cut a lot of this cost base, realize efficiencies, and make sure that we're making this beer as efficiently as we possibly can. And that doesn't mean sacrificing on quality, because we certainly haven't. But yeah, that was. And
do you think without that, going through that period, you might not have had that kind of change in thinking to kind of focus more on the profitability?
No, for sure. I mean, it sounds mental, a founder not focusing on profitability, because, that's what pays the bills. If you don't have profitability, you don't have cash flow. You don't have cash flow, you're dead in the water. Yeah. I think it could have hit at any time. I think it was not an if, but a when. Yeah. And I'm kind of glad it did hit when it hit, because if I look at the money required to keep the lights on, even in the short 12 months, that has changed quite significantly. Yeah. Whereas previously, we probably could have squeaked through. It's, I have no access to funds that could squeak us through anything at the moment. The costs have multiplied. So it's probably a good time to learn. The bar's doing a lot better now. Yeah. Our demand went right back up. And it looks like, we're tracking to have a 70% growth this year. So, to go from... Yeah. How are we going to turn over £240,000 every single month? Like, this is the minimum number that we have to do in order to not have to shut the doors. And we don't have a war chest. So if we don't do that and an unexpected bill hits, then, we're goner. To then, our November was our best month ever at 475. So, we've just come out the other side of it absolutely fine.
Great.
Great to have.
And what's fueling the growth then, in terms of, because I think, you've got listings now in supermarkets and export, and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky to have every channel in significant growth at the moment. So our B2C channel, sending beer directly out to customers, that's exploding. And I think that's a lot in thanks to seeing our beer out there on the supermarket shelves. I mean, how many people have tried sour beer, and also who wants to try a beer that's sour? It sounds terrible. It's one of the hardest things we have to overcome is our, the category that we live in. Beer that's sour makes you think of a pint of Tennent's after a house party that's sat out and there's probably someone put a cigarette out in it. It doesn't taste like that.
I was going to say, you're selling it well.
Yeah. Cracks them open.
But I mean, it's such a unique style, and like I say, it's a lot more like a cocktail or a cider than it is to a beer. And I think people are just really switching on to this. People are really sort of looking at it and going, wow, this is actually something pretty interesting. With the stuff in supermarkets, that's at a reasonable price point. They're trying it, they're enjoying it, they're going, right, where can I get more of this? They might be going to the local independent bar bottle shop, trying some more. If they're in Edinburgh, then they can go and come to the bars and check it out. But a lot of people are coming to us direct and buying, I got a 12-pack of beer. And then export's been absolutely flying this year as well. So we've been winning supermarket listings in places like Singapore and Switzerland. The general export stuff's been fantastic. It just seems to be like people are picking up more and more beer every time they come back. Denmark just takes mountains of beer from us, which is crazy to think.
And are these people who are proactively coming in? Is this inbound inquiries to you, or are you kind of actually seeking them out in Singapore and Denmark, for example?
A mixture of both, really. Yeah. So once the relationship's created, we tend to sit with one exporter for whatever territory it is that they support. Yeah. So the guys I was out in Singapore visiting the guys at Quality Drops who look after us out there, and their story is incredible as well. These are a couple of guys who UK expats. Went out to Singapore. They both work for Dyson, a lot more fun than it sounds. And they wanted to drink craft beer. And they then decided to start bringing in some craft beer. And they needed to buy quite a lot to make it sensible. So they bought pallets, and then they started selling it to people who owned bars. And, they're now at the stage where they're buying container loads of beer off of us and shipping it all around Singapore, gaining us supermarket listings. So, trying to identify these people who share your values, share your ethos, who are, very credible business people, it can be a little bit of a challenge, especially with the language barrier and the cultural barrier. We've certainly picked up a couple of dodgy exporters. Our old Italian ones sent me a very short, sharp message after we decided to move away. Won't share it on the podcast, but I don't think I'll be welcome in Italy again anytime soon. But then you move to another importer, and they do more in their first order than these guys have sold in 2 years. So it's challenging to get with the right people, but see, once you get with the right partners, it just explodes. There's nobody really doing what we do at our size as well. So we're able to kind of reach the economies of scale, which means that our core range can sort of be exported at a really attractive rate, and means that people can start to, to get someone to overcome the purchase of a sour beer. If it's on the shelves in, a European bottle shop at €12, are you going to really gamble on a can of beer at €12 that's 10%, that tastes like marshmallows and honeycomb? Maybe not. If you got a beer that says triple fruited mango and it's on the shelf at €3, yeah, okay, I can be convinced. Yeah. So getting beer at the right price is key, whilst completely maintaining quality. You just can't release bad products. It completely tanks your brand. We chuck away more beer than any other brewery that I know because we are incredibly fastidious with quality.
Well, we had Yolanda on from Luca's Ice Cream, and she was saying, they were like, we've been asked to do some really weird ice creams.
That's
I think she was talking about tomato ketchup ice cream.
Yeah,
and she says there's not been many that we've said we are not, we're not even letting you have that. Because it's just brutal. But I guess you kind of live in that space as well, of just like weird flavors and always having to check. You mentioned supermarket stuff. There's a story, right, about a supermarket. Tell us about it.
Yeah, for sure. So the craft beer industry has always been a little bit at arm's length with supermarkets. I always looked at it and went, well, do you know what? My craft beer journey started in a supermarket. I was going to Tesco's and buying Brewdog Punk IPA, Jackhammer. I remember there's a Tesco Finest IPA that was brewed by Brewdog that was really good. Innocent Gun Original, the rum finish one. This is what really got me into craft beer. Then started going to bottle shops because I had a reason to go to a beer bottle shop. Before then, I didn't. I didn't know craft beer was good. I didn't know it existed. I had to get into it somehow. So I've always been open to the idea of supermarkets, and it looks like the craft beer community is sort of coming around to that. So I was always interested in the potential of supplying the supermarkets, and I got a message from one of the guys at 71 Brewing saying, hey, the Tesco buyer's his Instagram page, he's just reviewed one of your beers, gave it really good ratings. You should get in touch. So sat on the toilet at the time. Sorry for the mental image. And I went onto the page, followed the guy, looked at the review, and as I was reading the review, he followed me back and sent me a message. Hey, would you be interested in stocking Tesco?
Cool.
Like, lucky I was on the toilet because I would have shit myself anyway. So straight away, yes, let's have a chat. And from that moment forth, I've been known as the goose that lays the golden eggs. No, I'm joking, but so that was that was the single, and our biggest customer by a country mile, doing over $1 million in revenue a year, all came from the bathroom. So it was, but yeah, working with the likes of Tesco is fantastic. Right enough, the revenues aren't what we get when we sell direct to consumers, but in terms of volume, we're putting tens of thousands of litres of beer into Tesco every single month, and our brand awareness has gone through the roof. And since then, we've gone into Morrison's, Sainsbury's, Waitrose, about to go into Asda, and we're about to put out across all the supermarkets, I think, 6 new products in April, on top of what we've already got in. So the journey is still going, it's still growing, and it's an incredible place to be. It doesn't come without its stress. These guys are very different to deal with. If your pallet is not wrapped correctly, it's a £50 fine. If you've not got the right stickers on boxes, £50 fine. It's like, I've just got a big pocket full of 50s that keep getting taken off me. But it's caused us to grow up really quick. One of the things, I always, I think I mentioned earlier, I'm reading through the Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, and one of the great things that I stick by is people, product, profits, in that order. And one of the things that we've done from day one is invested in people. And Charlotte, who's our supply chain manager, she's been instrumental in getting the supermarket contract set up, making sure they work efficiently. She's a force to be reckoned with, and joined us to pack boxes. So she came along 3-4 years ago to put beer in boxes at the end of the line. She was pals with someone, and then turns out, hey, I can do some of this accounting stuff, so I can maybe take that off your hands. And from there, she's gone to sort of being I think she's like the polyfiller that goes over all the cracks in the business and just makes everything a smooth ride. So yeah, getting the right people in to manage these things is so important.
It's interesting. Just before you arrived for today, we were talking about a quote that we'd heard from Frank Dick saying just the other day, and it's about ownership. And he says, ownership isn't something that you give, it's something that's taken. And it sounds like that, this girl's kind of stepped up and almost spotted the opportunity to take stuff. And that's what you want, right?
100%. She has, sponges in information. It's funny. Yeah. So another book I'd recommend. It was a guy who's an ex-FBI hostage negotiator. Never Split the Difference.
Chris Voss.
Chris Voss. So he did a masterclass as well. If you've ever had a look at masterclass, but Chris is great. And I can't remember for what reason Charlotte was negotiating, but I was like, look, I can give you a few hints and tips here, but if you really want to, all of my stuff comes from Chris Voss. Yeah. Go read that book. And then 2 weeks later, this is such bad timing, we had our annual wage reviews.
You idiot.
and credit to her, halfway through the wage reviews, I was like, sorry, you're using chapter 8 on me. She's like, I am. And I was like, do you know what? You can have whatever it is that you ask for, because, you've obviously listened and gone. Yeah. That was, I thought it was just some of the most hilarious timing. I got my own advice used against me within 2 weeks.
Great.
But yeah, see, honestly, just people that show initiative, that want to succeed, we're not a big business, which means that, but we are a growing business, which means there's going to be a lot of organic opportunity that comes up. Yeah. And if you want to keep performing and keep showing that you can do it, then you can go all the way. I don't want to be managing director for life. Somebody will fulfill those shoes at some point. Yeah. I don't care. I can't remember what company it was, but it's some multi-billion company that this, original Drayman, who's now running this multi-billion-pound beer company. Yeah. You've got to recognize potential, but you've got to then keep your eyes open for potential to be able to recognize it.
Incredible. Steve, what is your guiding principle in business?
I think the main takeaway is to question everything. So that has been a big part of what's got us here. But you need to stay agile, ensure that you've got people around you who you can trust. You're not carrying too much fat. I think one of the big things that I despise is decision by committee. One of the big things that Steve Jobs preached was small groups of smart people. So I still do keep those small groups of smart people, but I make sure whenever a big decision comes along, I'll absolutely take advice from everyone. I'll do the committee piece, and I won't make a decision in and there. That decision is to be made solo. You have to take your advice in, and I think some of the weakest decisions I've ever seen in business have been the ones where everyone sat around a table adding their piece, because whatever way you're trying to take it, it just seems to be a diluted version of the middle, which is some of the worst places to be. So get the opinions on the table, go away, make your decision, go back, tell people what's happening. It sounds a bit dictatorial, but I think so far we've established I'm a control freak, dictator, business owner. Move aggressively, act decisively without seeming insane. Which I really like. If you look at someone like Elon Musk, that's someone who, if you asked me 3 years ago, I probably would have said is one of my sort of all-time people who I'd look up to and try and replicate what he's achieved. He started to look incredibly insane. A lot of the stuff that a lot of the business moves that he's been making seem to be driven by ego and nonsensical to the overarching mission statement that he used to preach a couple of years ago. So, but keeping that aggressive nature to your business approach, and I don't mean shouting at people and going into things bullishly, but move with intent. Know what you're going to try, know what you're trying to achieve, and make sure that every decision that you make along the way ties to that decision. It's like an apple, short, sharp spear. Don't be, if you're going to throw something at someone, make it short and sharp rather than flat and wobbly.
Very good. It's interesting, just when you say that, literally this morning I was listening to Lex Friedman podcast. I don't know if you're on that one. And it's Jeff Bezos. And he's got Blue Origin now, which is the space travel one. And he said that they want to be known for being the most decisive company in the world. So in the same way as Amazon was the most customer-centric business in the world, he says the most decisive, and that he says that's a real thing. I think that's kind of supporting what you say, but keep it on purpose and in line.
No, exactly. There's so many distractions in the business world. There's even more distractions in our world because what we do is inherently incredibly fun and interesting, and we've got a couple of new projects coming up that the entire organization would probably like to chat about, but you have to really be you have to create that small group of smart people where you've got only the people who really need to be part of the decision making the decision. And sometimes that requires a conversation with someone saying, hey, I'm not excluding you here because I don't think that you're not up to the task. I'm excluding you because I feel like I need this blend of people, and that doesn't include you. Which can sometimes be a difficult conversation, but you have to have the difficult conversations. I think, one of the things to remember is you can try and run a business whilst being everyone's friend, but that relationship will always be unbalanced, and it'll never be an equal relationship. That took a wee while for me to get over. It was actually interesting listening to the Float podcast the other day, and was it Ali?
Colin.
Sorry, I found that quite an interesting insight. And sometimes you hear these things and you realize, actually, I've kind of come to that decision without actually hearing the decision. If you know what I mean. So that was really interesting.
Excellent.
Steve, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your story, and we wish you every luck in the future.
Thank you very much. Cheers, guys.
Great stuff. Well done.